There we go. And Tara, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Right, well, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. It's my pleasure to lead today our session on professional social skills, etiquette on the road to success. So there are four main objectives of this training that we'll go over today. First, we're going to define what professional social skills are and how these are actually really key to your success. Then we're going to outline some key elements of correspondence etiquette. So this can include emails, phone calls, and written letters. We'll also take a look at how etiquette should be followed in introductions and some key tips on professional appearance. And then lastly, we'll end our talk outlining some key elements of workplace specific etiquette. So this is going to go over things that you can, some tips that you can have in the office. And also a little bit, we'll briefly touch on networking, and then we'll end with the dining, which is uh, etiquette that you don't often think of, but you sometimes find yourself in. So we'll go over that as well. So, first off, what are professional social skills? So basically, they're skills that facilitate relationships, and they really require you to have a good working knowledge of the roles and the tasks that the people in your team would be assigned to. And so they were the toughest part is that a lot of these skills they're learned through experience. So you really won't get them in an academic setting. So that's why this training that we're offering today is going to be so great because you guys are all going to get a sneak peek of all of these skills that are going to allow you to make a great first impression in any professional setting immediately when you get there instead of playing the waiting game and watching everybody to kind of pick up on some of these unspoken norms. So jumping right in, the first thing we're going to talk about is correspondence etiquette. So I'll go over emails. So some etiquette that we should follow when putting out those emails. They're such a big part of our virtual world today. So I want to make sure that everybody kind of understands the formalities that are actually expected in this form of communication. Next, I'll talk about phone calls. These actually, texting has really taken over the world, but phone calls go into the professional workplace. It's still a big part of what you're going to be doing every day. So I'll give you some tips on what to expect with phone calls. And then lastly, one of the more phased out kind of approaches of communication are the good old fashioned written letter. So we don't use these often, but when we do, they're often a big deal. So that's why it's really important that you guys understand what goes into a good written letter. These a good example of a particular opportunity where a written letter would be key is when you're writing a thank you letter for an interview that you had. So that's just one example. So these things do matter, and I hope that you guys find some of these tips useful. So the very first thing are the do's and don'ts of emails. So these, I mean, I can't go over all the do's and don'ts. There's a lot out there on the internet, so just do a Google search. But these are some of the big ones that I've seen from my professional experience. So always, 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 it's super hard because we're all like fast paced, trying to make sure that we get all these emails out. But you need to check your spelling and grammar. Like that's huge. Reread, have somebody else even read your email if it's that important. Because again, somebody opens that up and that's going to be their first impression of you sometimes. And if you misspelled something or you put a period in a weird spot and the tone is now totally wrong, that's going to be hard to come back from. And so a big don't I've actually seen this quite a bit in the professional setting, but using capitals. So right when you write in all caps, virtually it's like you're yelling at the person. So don't do that. And often we see this. It's just everyone. I've seen everyone do it, and you do it when you get excited, or sometimes you do it when you're upset. And also, on a side note, I don't recommend sending emails upset. Do a 24-hour wait block. Also, try to be concise and to the point. Like, you don't need to use all of these extra words. Try to keep things minimal. Avoid using long sentences. We're not writing an essay or a paragraph. This is a quick form of communication, and so things should be direct. Um, Also, make sure that your subject line is meaningful. This will help your messages from not going to junk inbox or just being passed. Again, we're all really consumed in the virtual world, so that's super important that you make your subject lines meaningful. Also, this is a big one that I do unfortunately see is using emotionally charged language. So that kind of ties back into the using of capitals. Just don't do it. Give yourself that cooling off period. I mean, you're already virtual. Like, do you really need to yell at somebody through email? Probably not. The answer is no. I'm just telling you no. So just don't do it. And uh, what I mean by a good example of emotionally charged language is like you. I told you to do this. That I mean, it sounds simple enough, but it comes across really bad in a professional email. Also, use a signature if you can, and make sure it identifies who you are. So, some kind of point of contact other than your email. Like, obviously, you're emailing the person, but put alternative forms of means of contact. So that can be your cell if you're comfortable with it, or a work phone. I know things are kind of crazy with COVID, but try to give people an opportunity to get back to you. Also, don't overuse the CC field. So that's where you add other people on an email that you might think may be important to that person. Oftentimes, it's not, unless it's you're working on a team project. So again, try to minimize the usage of that, because again, people are going to get tired of seeing your emails, and then you might have something that comes up that's super important, and they're not going to pay attention to it until a later time. And then I kind of touched on this in the don't section, but limit the use of I or you in your emails. Um, I always like to remove that piece because again, it can come off a little too personal, and we want these emails to be professional. Also, do not forward the chain letters. And this is, I see this often when people get really excited about some kind of event in the office that's going on. And then it can get out of hand really, really fast. So try to avoid doing that because, again, it's not a good look. Eventually, the email might get to your boss, and if you are forwarding something that's funny for everybody else below the level of the boss, you might run into some issues there with HR. So try to limit that as well, just for that reason. Also, use salutations that's appropriate for the position or the audience. So what I mean by this is, if you are in a professional work setting and you don't know the colleague, the person that you're going to communicate that well, you should start off with dear whoever. And then if you begin to foster a relationship with that person, then you can transition to hi, or hello. But don't ever, I would do not recommend starting off with hey, or even worse, no salutation. I see that quite a bit. I know we're all like super, super rushed, But etiquette and professionalism goes so far, and it's just such an easy thing. You can even set up your email to have this already integrated as a template for yourself. And so you can just have your salutation, type your body up, and already have your signature lines ready to go. And so that makes you look like you have your stuff together. So highly recommend. Also, don't overuse the high priority option button, if you guys are familiar with that. Everything should not be a higher priority. If it is, then that means that you didn't do your job correctly. And you should probably consider time management training, is my opinion on that one. Also, use professional titles or names unless somebody invites you. So that means doctor, whoever, Mr. If you don't know if they have like a formal like title, Mr. or Mrs. Also, I've actually unfortunately seen this a lot too in the professional setting. Stationery, the really unusual stationery with like floral or checkered patterns, or your signature line is bold or has crazy text, or it's like your it's bigger than your whole email message. I've seen it all, and so just try to avoid that. I know you want to be unique, but it's not appropriate in the professional setting. It's okay if you're emailing your friend, but not your boss. So um, any questions on the email etiquette? I know I threw a lot at you guys on that.
Nothing in the chat so far.
Okay. And so I wanted to hone in on this piece a little bit more, active versus passive voice. So an active voice, this is a great example. You must not leave the door open. Okay, so that comes off like virtually kind of harsh. You must not leave it open. But if we remove the you, the door must not be left open, it sounds a little bit more general, sounds a little less harsh. And so, I mean, people have mixed opinions about this particular method of communicating, but from my experience, I think using a passive voice and sticking with that for the most part tends to make sure that you're not coming off in a negative or confrontational way. So that's just a little tidbit there. So emails. We've been talking a lot about emails. So how do you write one? Well, the first component is going to be the strong subject line. Sorry about that. So very specific, who it's from, and maybe even a brief idea of what action item might need to be achieved with it. And then the second big piece is going to be the personal greeting. We already went over that, so we should always start off with dear whomever, unless we have a really great personal relationship with the person. And then we can have a nice first to the point sentence. So this, again, should be very clear, very direct. And then if you have any supporting information, you can put that into a paragraph form. And then finally, you can end with some kind of action item, something actionable that needs to be done, the whole reason why you were contacting the person in the first place. And then, as always, a formal sign-off should be included. I see this so many times where it's not sincerely, or thank you, or warm regards, or there's so many options, but I see this a lot. It's just not included, and so that leaves the person kind of with a end with no closure. So I always add that final sign off. And then, of course, if you have attachments, include them. But I know we all forget them, but it's kind of nice. Sometimes, depending on what program you use, it'll remind you that you forgot an attachment. So that's great about tech nowadays. But it just depends on what platform. So always double check to make sure your attachments are included. So next up is the thank you email. So the thank you email is super important because we get all of those standard emails all day, And it is so refreshing when you actually do get a thank you email. And they're very powerful, I think, because of that. And so this can open all kinds of opportunities for you just with a simple thank you email. It gives the person that receives it a really nice impression of you. Like you literally took the time out of your busy day to thank them for something that they did for you. And so this is a super, super basic template. So obviously we're always going to have a subject. We're always going to have that salutation. And then in your first little section, you should start by thanking the person for what they've done for you. And then you can mention in the second paragraph what you're going to do because of what they did for you. And then you can end that by speaking about your next action item. So again, showing that uh, basically you're paying it forward in a way. And then finally, you're closing it out with a thank you or some kind of nice ending. And of course, your name. So another interesting thing that we have in this virtual world is flaming. So flaming is actually a term for delivering a inflammatory message or something that's really harsh in a virtual, like harsh message, and it could be either in an email or it could be in a virtual meeting. So the flame itself is some strongly held thought or opinion that's delivered in a way that you don't hold back. And so I've actually, unfortunately, have witnessed it in a virtual meeting. So it does happen, and I've unfortunately seen both emails and in a Zoom meeting. So again, you gotta take that step back. You gotta filter yourself. It seems really easy because we're not face to face, but all the more reason to just withhold a little bit. So, what happens if a flame happens? Like, how do we put it out? Well, if you realize that you were the one that started the fire, obviously apologize. But if you're on the receiving end and maybe it is like something that you did and you are in the wrong, that again, apologize. And then your next step in your reply can be addressing the fact that if they're right, thank them for that. Always be thankful. I think that's the big overarching goal. And also, if you're aware of the issue, so they claimed because there really is a problem and they're really upset about it, and you're working on it, just mention that to them. That'll probably help calm that person down. And also empathize with the sender's frustration. So even though you may not agree with how angry they are about whatever particular situation that made them flame in the first place, just try to understand where they're coming from and make that clear in your reply. So don't attack the person. I think that's the biggest thing. And also don't let the flame just fester and don't wait too long because then the person's only going to get more upset and they may send you another email or verbal attack. So just try to put it out as quickly as you can and try to understand where they're coming from. So next is phone call etiquette. So this one for me is a little bit easier. There's some really good scripts out there with a simple Google search, but there's three big things that you can do in phone call with phone calls. So first, you should identify yourself and the reason that you're calling, and then follow up with like a genuine "How are you doing?" And then this is a really easy thing to do, but smile when you're speaking. So they can't see you, but when you smile when you're speaking, it comes through on the phone as like you're just the happiest person ever. So that's a great like insider tip. So try that next time, and on your next phone call and see what response you get out of that. So I don't have a whole lot on the phone call, but I'd be happy to answer questions if people have some about that. So next, face-to-face etiquette. So there's two big things in face-to-face etiquette. One is the introduction. That's really super important because again, that's the first thing that somebody's going to remember about you. And unfortunately or fortunately, just depending on how you look at it, professional appearance also plays a role in this introductory piece. So the first time you meet someone, or the second or the third, they're going to take how you look into consideration. Well, and I think one of my out of get order, but anyways, we can go over the written letter etiquette. So again, just like the email, there should be various components that are included within your letter. So first is the typed portion or the heading, and then for the formal letters, you'll also want to include a date, an address, of course, the salutation, because we're talking about formal letters, the body or text. And then this is a really big one. For your formal letter, when you type it out, you should also print it out and actually sign your name. So that's a big one. That's just a little, sets it apart from your email. And then also, obviously, you would put a typed component of your name as well. And so when should you send a thank you letter or an email? So if somebody went out of their way to provide a service for you, you would definitely should send it. Also, if you do a significant amount of work for a particular person, but you don't see them often, send it. And also another like little strategy is if you're working in a team and you have a big project, send a thank you letter just to keep the person or your team engaged on the next milestones of your project. So keeping them positive and motivated. But some times that you might not want to send a thank you letter or email is if you know the person's super busy and that wouldn't be very good for them. Also, if you meet with a person really frequently, it seems kind of silly to send a formal letter, like a written letter, if you're going to see them tomorrow. Just thank them in person. Also, if you, the email that you were thinking about sending isn't really, it's something insignificant. So that's up to judgment, like what you think is significant or okay, and so I think we're finally back on track. So I mentioned introductions are a key component of face-to-face etiquette. So some tips for introductions include introducing the person based on their professional rank, not their gender, not their culture, not like all of these other things. It's about their professional rank. Also, you can shake their hand unless you're in a pandemic. I don't recommend at the current moment, but under normal circumstances, you would do a nice handshake, and we'll go over what that means here in a minute. You should also always smile and maintain eye contact, and demonstrate professionalism and credibility by clearly stating your full name. So, hi, my name is Tara Flaugher, and that's part of your professional identity. So you want them to know how to say your last name if it's weird. And then I've included a little link in this PowerPoint too for some great speaking scripts that are out there. So you just click on it and take a look. They have all these different scenarios that you could kind of rehearse, and that way in your next introduction, it can go super smooth. So I mentioned the handshake. So there's a good handshake. It's unfortunate that we're not in person and we're here in a pandemic, But if we ever get back to the days of handshaking, a good handshake involves a nice palm to palm, firm grip, no limp or awkward angles or just holding of the fingertips. And also make sure that you're giving the same handshake to everyone. It's not different based on gender. So that used to be a big thing in the past. So I won't go into the history too much, but just give everybody the same handshake. And then the second part of face-to-face etiquette is professional appearance. So it really depends on what kind of situation you're in. So if you're going for a more formal kind of setting, a nice suit, a tie, dress shoes, this intermediate picture here on the left-hand side, where she's wearing a nice pair of slacks and a nice dress shirt, that's kind of your business casual look. So if you hear business casual, it's something along those lines. And also, you can wear t-shirts as well. It just depends on the workplace, all of the workplace norms. But one trickier component is the shoes. So it depends on where you're at. Sometimes, so for example, if you're in a lab, open-toed shoes would be bad. So you wouldn't wear that. Or in a lot of professional workplaces, also it's kind of iffy with open-toed shoes, but I would lean on the side of just don't wear them if you're at a professional workplace setting. And if you're in a professional workplace setting, everybody on the right, we should be wearing athletic wear. I know it's tough, especially if you're in academia, but you do want to set up that professional image early on, even if you're in academia. So it's not a bad thing to start practicing these kind of looks now, so that way you get in the groove of looking professional. So like I said, it's a hit or miss on the open-toed shoes, but I would lean on a no for that, especially if you're in the workplace. So we talked about how to look in the workplace and the first impressions that introductions that you can make. So the next piece is how to act in the office, how to act in meetings, a little bit about networking, and then we'll end with some dining tips. So general office etiquette is don't be disruptive. So this can mean a lot of different things. You can be disruptive with sounds, so putting on music that's too loud without asking. It's okay if you ask your colleagues and they say, okay, yeah, no problem, I like the same music. But definitely ask. You can also be disruptive with smells, so that's kind of tricky, a trickier one. So make sure that you're practicing good personal hygiene. If you do sit or you decide to take lunch at your desk, try to avoid things that might be smelly in your lunchbox. Or take them outside, have lunch outside. Also, another big thing with office etiquette is to avoid the drama. And this really does happen a lot. And I see it a lot, and people get bored and they gossip. So if you see gossiping, try to stop it first, but definitely do not get involved. It never ends well, so just avoid that. And then lastly, respect the space and others. And so we can do that by keeping our desk nice and clean and organized. Again, practicing good personal hygiene. And I think those are the big ones. So meeting etiquette. So for meetings, they can be pretty bad if you don't have an or. So an outcome, agenda, roles, and rules. These are huge. I've seen many meetings go awry because everybody's not rowing in the same direction. There's no or, And 2 hours later, you walk out of the meeting and nothing has been accomplished. There are no action items, and you're probably more frustrated than you were going into it. And then you'll probably, because of your frustration, have to go take a break and then even lose out on more work time. So if you get your or before you go into your meeting, I think things will go a whole lot better. So what do I mean by these things? Outcome? Well, first you need to outline what you want to achieve with your meeting. So address that question right off. And be proactive. Think about what your potential action items may be from that meeting. Then a big one is the agenda. So you need to outline an agenda, especially if you're the one who is organizing the meeting. Without the agenda, like I said, everybody, they may have an or, but they'll all have a different or and be paddling it in different directions. So again, I would highly recommend creating the agenda and sending it out prior to your meeting. It will make things go so much smoother. For the roles, so there are two big roles that should be assigned in a meeting setting. And the first one is a moderator. So that's the kind of person that keeps everybody on track and rowing in the right direction. Another key person is going to be the note taker. So their main role is going to be to make sure that all of the important stuff that's discussed is actually recorded, and that way people can do those action items. And then of course the speaker. And so that kind of plays into our last piece are the rules. So the speaker and the moderator have to make sure that everybody gets an equal chance to contribute and to speak and bring up anything that they may have. So next we have networking etiquette. So some quick tips for networking is that you should have your contact information ready. So I would always recommend, and it's a little different that we're not face to face, but in any case, be prepared to give your elevator speech and if you're virtual. But if you're not virtual somehow, then I definitely recommend having a nice like leather bound folder or kind of some nice clipboard if you can, or a folder. And in that, you can put your business cards and resumes, and have a portfolio if that's something that your particular field has. Have that on hand, and that way, if an opportunity does come up, you already have it, and you look so prepared. And also, I mean, the big theme of the day is saying thank you. So as soon as you meet somebody and you have a great introduction, you guys really hit it off, and you have their business card and you're super excited, email them right away and thank them so much for the opportunity, for talking to you about whatever it was that you guys discussed. And it doesn't even have to lead to some actionable thing, but just definitely follow up and follow up quickly. I would recommend doing that within 24 hours if you can. Another big thing is if you're going to a networking event for a job, don't ever come right out and say that you want a job. Try to remain like a little lucrative. Make it seem like you have other opportunities on the table, and you're just interested in what they have, what they do, and what they have to say. Also, a big thing is dressing the part. Say you did go to this networking event, you don't have a job, but you should dress for the part. So dress for that job that you want. And that you can take a look at that personal appearance slide that we have. And it'll just be that dressing the part will be based off of whatever industry that you're targeting. And then last but not least, you should just be positive and upbeat. It's fun. This is random. Something totally great could come out of it. Even if it doesn't, it's great practice. So just try to look at it as the most positive way that you can. All right. So last but kind of not least is dining etiquette. So you can actually run into this situation when you may have interviews. That's a big one. I've experienced that at least twice, and nobody talks about dining etiquette. So I'll dive a little bit. I'm not going to get too in detail, but you guys will have an opportunity to look at this diagram that I'll show next. So here's all of the different pieces of a super fancy dining room set. So we have all these different glasses that you could possibly have, all these daunting forks, all the daunting knives, and then there's even rules about your napkin and when you can place it and how to pass the pepper. So again, I'm not going to dive into this slide too much, but at least you guys have it on hand and you can refer to it if you know you have something coming up where you may have an interview that includes a dining experience, which is fun, but it could be really, really daunting if you don't know what to do. So I would recommend just reviewing this. And interestingly, you can also communicate with your fork and knife. And so I think the biggest two here are going to be your pause. So how to position your fork and knife if you're not finished versus you're finished. And then all these other ones I've never really seen used unless you're in a super, super formal setting. But I think the pause and the finish are the ones that you would probably use if ever. Oh, okay. So in conclusion, there are many professional social skills, and all are vital to your success. And so, how do we get better at these? Well, I mentioned this a lot throughout the talk. Practice, 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 practice. You're not going to send out the perfect email on your first try or probably your third try, but they're only going to get better. And so that's what brings us to our task today. So, in light of the month of November, Thanksgiving, we're going to give thanks. So, the task is to send one thank you email, or you can venture out into the formal written card or letter land. And you can send this to a colleague, a teacher, a boss, and then your job will be to write us a short paragraph on the response you received. And I almost guarantee you it's going to be a good one. And so you also can feel free to email me directly for any questions that you may have about how to develop these letters, or if you need help editing or anything else really. I'm happy to help, and I'll take any further questions.
Okay, so first I'm going to stop recording so people will feel